Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're moving the conversation along after the attack that took place in London on Wednesday, seeing what can be done, what should be done in the face of rampages, the likes we've seen in Nice on Bastille Day, in Berlin back in December, and now in London. With us to talk about it, Simon Schofield of the Human Security Centre, who joins us from the British capital. Welcome back as well to Julie Ebner of the Quilliam Foundation, who is also in London here in the studio. Guillaume Dunois de Saint-Marc, who works with victims of terror attacks and member of the Radicalization Awareness Network, and as well academic and filmmaker Assiem El Difraoui. Before we go to our panel, let's go to Trafalgar Square. And correspondent Duncan Woodside, we heard the remarks by the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. What's the mood where you are?
Well, indeed, yes, there were three key speakers. There were Sadiq Khan, who is the Mayor of London, Amber Rudd, who is the Home Secretary, and also the Acting Police Commissioner, Craig Mackey. And they all spoke on similar themes, really, speaking of the need to overcome hatred, to come together. Sadiq Khan, the London Mayor, saying that Londoners will not be cowed by incidents like this. However, the vigil here, the candle lighting ceremony, and the various speeches by those three key dignitaries hasn't been massively well attended. I would say that in total, excluding the very many journalists who are here, there were perhaps 1,000 people gathered. Explaining that, obviously it's quite cold here in London this evening. There's a renewed cold spell in the capital, but also perhaps people slightly wary after yesterday's events of gathering together in large numbers in one space, because obviously that can potentially create something of a target for further would-be attackers. But yeah, not a massively well-attended gathering. It was really quite low-key here and somber.
All right, many thanks for that. Duncan Woodside there at Trafalgar Square. On the hashtag F24debate, Kevin saying a snapshot of London's magnificent diversity and those injured. French, Romanian, Korean, German, Polish, Irish, Chinese, US, Italian, and Greek. Guillaume Dunois de Saint-Marc, that harks back to what you were saying in part one of our discussion, which was the high symbolic value of the place that was hit.
Yeah, it's a very symbolic place. Unfortunately, as you can know, there was a lot of French students over there.
Yeah, they were on a school field trip.
And we are totally concerned because we're already in contact with not yet the victims, but the authority around the victims. We're going to be in a big process, a long process, to help this young person and the parents to get through the event.
Yeah, because I heard the principal of the school saying how already they're putting stuff together, get the kids who are back in Concarneau on the Brittany coast from that school to talk together. It takes years, decades to get over something like this.
It takes a lot of time. It reminds me to a terrorist attack that happened in Cairo in 2009, where it was young adults and a person has been killed. And still now we are helping the families. We are still working on this investigation. We went in Cairo a few weeks ago to help them to recover and to understand what happened exactly. We're going to have the same process here. It's a long time process. It's very difficult, which makes it complicated and can be also something helping is that there are teenagers. And as a teenager, things are moving a lot. If we are very close to them, help them psychologically, maybe they can leave it away when they become adults, do with it, but on a positive way. But it can happen, but it can also be a way for them to have very big difficulties for all their life, So it's very important that we have to be with them for a long term, immediately now and for a long time.
Yeah, to be by their side and
and help them and help them professionally, not only by speaking like that. It has to be with psychologists, with a psychotherapist, together between them. There are many different methods. One of what we do is a Projet Phoenix, and it's a way for them to get through the process. But it's an individual and collective process, which just makes things difficult.
Simon Schofield, let me ask you, because some have written in the press, now we've seen that there was a few years back this momentum for ISIS when they had established this caliphate, as they call it, in Syria and Iraq. Now that they're losing on the battlefield, the argument that we should expect more attacks like this in Europe. Is that true, or would there be attacks anyways?
I think it's difficult to call for sure, but it's very clear that we are seeing this is the death rattle of Islamic State as a coherent identity. And the more we hammer them in Iraq and Syria, the more they're going to lash out abroad. I think that's very clear. At the same time, however, many of these individuals have been motivated, having been reached out to online, directly or indirectly, and there are whole instruction manuals in Al-Qaeda's Inspire magazine and in Islamic State's Dabiq magazine, which outline, if you want to carry out a terrorist attack, this is how you do it, this is the best time, this is the best place, these are the best methods. That information is out there now, probably forever, such as the internet, and so we could well be seeing attacks as a result of that anyway.
Asia Mendifraoui, do events that take place in Syria and Iraq, are they relevant or not to this?
Obviously, they're very relevant, but we don't take jihadism, we don't analyze it enough as a global phenomenon. Again, we don't analyze it enough as a local phenomenon, but we don't see the global dimension. The Islamic State capital Raqqa will be taken at some time. The pseudo-caliph will be killed sometime, same as bin Laden was. But we have so many other jihadi groups, like from Boko Haram through Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, all those groups in Afghanistan, the groups in Yemen, and we still always focus on one group instead of seeing this global dimension of the phenomenon. Do we have a common foreign policy towards Syria, for example? We're speaking about traumatized victims here. In Syria, we speak about dozens of thousands of young traumatized children which need to be treated at some stage, who have been radicalized. And we don't still have a common European approach to that. We don't have an approach of what doing in French banlieues and working with kids who have been radicalized here. So I'm really asking for a large-scale, public large-scale reflection about jihadism, which was, for example, totally absent from the French presidential debate so far. Even the banlieue was not present in the French presidential debate until riots invited, the youth invited themselves through riots into this debate. And we have no open discussion how to tackle this multiform hydra of jihadism, which is so complicated to confront.
Because blaming people is easy and having a discussion about this issue is complicated.
No, it's very complicated also to say, what are our politics to the Middle East, for example? Very respected scholars, for example, predict that jihadism will still be on the rise in Europe for numerous reasons. One of them is ongoing conflicts in the Middle East. Secondly is the non-integration of a rising male Muslim population in Europe into the economic system for several reasons. For low education levels, which young Muslim men often unfortunately have, and for their rejection by society. If we don't have an open debate, we won't get to the end of jihadism, because jihadism can't be only combated with military means and tougher security measures in Europe.
All right, this mood of people getting more extreme, the British Parliament's already been a target this past year, what with a white supremacist murdering Labour MP Jo Cox in her Yorkshire constituency in the run-up to the Brexit referendum. And for many, the fight against hatred is a fight against hatred all around.
We will not allow a backlash of Islamophobia. Everybody will get on with their business. So it succeeded in taking some innocent lives, but it will not succeed as an act of terrorism.
We will not allow a backlash of Islamophobia, she says. Julie Ebner, is that going to happen, though?
Well, the problem is that it's in the immediate aftermath that we can shape the narrative, and that's also why it's on us now to say that no, it's not Islam that is at war with the West. It is Islamist extremists, jihadists that are trying to create, to foster these, widen these rifts within our societies. And if we react in that way, it is true that we give them even more fuel, and that they will ultimately achieve what they want, which is driving divisions on all levels, on a community level, even within Muslim minority communities, within any form of religious or ethnic minority communities, but also on a political level, and of course on the international institutional level. I think we've seen huge spikes in online and offline anti-Muslim hate crimes in the aftermath of Brexit, but also after the US elections. And I think this is, of course, they are living off this chaos that is created by the fear that they want to instill with their terrorist attacks. And that's their management of savagery strategy, the only way that asymmetric warfare can succeed.
Julia, the new leader of UKIP this Thursday, saying that Muslim communities need to do more to basically crack down on this stuff within their own communities. What do you think of that statement, and how much traction is UKIP going to get?
I hope that not much, but I mean, to be honest, I think UKIP after Brexit doesn't really have a purpose anymore. But apart from that, I think that the statement is fundamentally flawed, because what we can see now, and UKIP was all about, or at least parts within UKIP were very much trying to emphasize have this anti-immigration stance, which now is proven to be that there is not always a link between immigration and terrorism. This citizen was a Brit, and the perpetrator was a homegrown terrorist, and that's why it's all the more important to rather foster community resilience by improving community cohesion and integration efforts, rather than further alienating these communities. And I think that's also what these incidents show us, that because of this, because it's easy now to stage a terrorist attack as a self-starter, and the security forces and the intelligence services are to some extent powerless against these forms of high-tech but low-tech but high-impact attacks. It's important even more to be resilient on a civil society level, and there doesn't UKIP's rhetoric, I think, doesn't help at all.
All right, reaction on the hashtag F24 debate. Stevie, vibrant, inclusive, diverse, brave. London continues. Vile, divisive, disgusting, cowardly. Hopkins, Farage, UKIP continue as well. Let me ask you, Simon Schofield, you just heard Julia Ebner talk about the need for more cohesion within British communities, a more cohesive and inclusive social fabric to address these issues. In the 12 years that have followed the 7/7 attacks that hit the London Underground in 2005, has Britain gotten better at any of this?
I think Britain has gotten better at social cohesion, but it's not a case of have we got it right or have we got it wrong, because it's a continuing journey. It's something that we have to continually be aware of, and we continually have to be selling our values. There is clearly a group such as Islamic State, but such groups will probably exist for a long time, that are trying to seduce certain corners of our society into embracing a value system which is entirely incompatible with the world in which we choose to live. So it's a case of every single day having to make the case to everybody, be people who are vulnerable to far-right indoctrination, to Islamist indoctrination, or to extremist ideologies that we don't even know about yet. Every day it's a case of liberal democracy is the way forward. Islamic State makes it very clear in their own writings that they want to eliminate what they call the grey zone. And they call the grey zone the area where Muslims can coexist with Westerners. And so their strategy is to attack as often as they can, to the point where we reject Muslims, and all Muslims have no other option but to live in the wilderness or to embrace radical Islam. We have to resist that with every fibre of our being and continue to extend the open hand rather than the closed fist where we can to those in our own society, whilst also managing those who have crossed the threshold into extremism and making sure that they can't pose a lethal threat to those
Simon,
just going about their lives.
As you heard our guests here in Paris say, this is a conversation that's not happening ahead of the French presidential election. The debate is not about that. It's more about things like banning the burkini and the such. And where you are, the big difference with 12 years ago is that now you have a UKIP party, which has grown from nothing to having a member of parliament and a big representation in the European Parliament.
I agree, but in my view, UKIP has grown largely as a result of anti-European sentiment, or rather anti-EU sentiment. And now that the Brexit referendum has come and gone, I don't believe that UKIP remains a relevant political force. That's not to say that it doesn't still command some followers, but I don't think it's going to be triggering a wave of right-wing extremism on its own anytime soon.
Julie Ebner, you agree?
I think that, I would also not label UKIP per se as far-right, but that they have definitely attracted some of the more, let's say, militant far-right as well. They have pandered to the very far-right. And in fact, I think it's 10% of UKIP voters that have self-identified themselves as very far-right. And that shows that to some extent, even if UKIP doesn't exist anymore in maybe a year's time or 2 years, there will still be, I think, these anti-Muslim resentments will rather grow worse. And that's also something we've seen across the UK, the far-right hate crimes and also far-right radicalization rates and recruitment rates into far-right militant groups have risen enormously since Brexit, but also within the last year, also in reaction to the terrorist attacks.
Guillaume Dunois de Saint-Marc, is it the same narrative all across Europe, or is each country a specific case?
I think there is a big difference between France and UK due to integration or not system. What we are doing, we're trying to work in Sarcelles. We're going to,
which is a working class suburb north of Paris.
We're doing research and action in Sarcelles for 3 years. We started a few months ago. And we were trying to get out from the religious aspect, because I think it's much more about politics and the way to live together. And we work on different subjects, but specifically on how do we get out from the victimized position. And it's very important because every radicalist, every person extreme, is always seeing itself as a victim and justify violence by being a victim. So that's one of the elements, but it's
and how do you concretely, how do you do that? How do you get them, convince them they're not victims?
Everybody can be victim, in the life. We are always victimized by different events around our life, but we come with victims of terrorism, and they can be Muslim, they can be Jews, they can be no believer, they can be Christian, and we have different victims who went through all a process where they were deeply affected, and then they came back to society, and they become very active in society. And how the story is not how they've been victimized. That's justify the capacity to speak about it, but how they came out from the victimized position without getting through violence, hate, vengeance. And this can be a powerful message to start speaking about violence, speaking about society, speaking about different aspects. So it's not the only point, of course, but it's a starting point that we use to speak about society, to speak about terrorism, to speak about religion, to speak about all the different aspects coming from that point. Of course, we bring also other experts, other speakers, like parents of persons who went to Syria, as formers, but also sociologists, expert on how the conflicts. But all these different approach, it's a way to bring persons to think about what they want, what their place in the society, and to open the discussion. It's very important. We're now in a moment where nobody is really speaking deeply about their personal emotions, how they feel, what are they doing in the society, how do they interact with other persons who are different. And it's a way to reopen discussions, and sometimes it's very tough discussions, but it's very important that we can open the dialogue.
All right, and this is important because we're talking about people who feel like they're second-class citizens. You were mentioning how these are not people who come from abroad. They're born in France or born in the UK, according.
We have been mentioning this victimization, which is one of the important aspects of important factor for radicalization, the sense of not belonging, economic and social apartheid. But we haven't spoken today of another very important issue in terms of jihadism. Our colleagues in London were talking about Islamic communities. You know, we don't have Islamic communities in Europe. We have Muslims. And the question is like, you know, do we want to organize Muslims into communities or just treat them as citizens? Which is much better, you know, which I believe in creating artificial Muslim communities. Sunni Islam doesn't have a church. But then again, there's this huge question, which we haven't been talking about, is like, what in Islam can be so simply hijacked by jihadists to create this ideology of pseudo-martyrdom, of